Good morning, everyone. This is Vulnerabilities of Wireless Water Meter Networks, and your speaker is John McNabb.
Okay, thank you. Reminder to turn to your feedback forms. Some background. I come to this talk from a water department perspective, 13 years running a local water department in New England. I've been writing journal articles on water infrastructure for the New England Water Works Association Journal. I also worked for an environmental agency in Massachusetts and a Clean Water Action for 10 years. And I've been an IT pro for 6 years, a researcher for 2, and I'm totally independent researcher. Do it in my spare time when I'm not doing tech support for my home business. I gave a talk last year at DEFCON on cyber terrorism and the security of the national drinking water infrastructure. That was featured in the March 2011 Hacker Japan is their cover story. I gave a talk at Shmoocon, sort of a work in progress, getting ready for this talk on hacking smart water meters. And I just heard before I came here that my white paper in a revised form that I submitted to BlackHat will be appearing after I revise it in the book Weapons of Mass Destruction and Terrorism, 2nd edition, and most likely also in the New England Water Works Association Journal. So I seem to be one of the few people looking at cyber issues for the water infrastructure. So I tend to keep at that for a while, as long as I can. This talk is obviously about wireless water meters, what they are used for, and what they could be used for, potential issues, threats, etc. This will not be a heavily technical talk, no exploits or tools. But again, the need for this talk is that there's a lot of talk and attention on the electric smart grid, but not so much on the water smart grid, which this is a part of. And again, I come at this from a water-centric position, from the big picture, looking at what does a water department use them for, what could it use them for, what could other people use them for, what's the development of the technology, and where do we go from there. So it's a little different talk, perhaps, than the other more technical talks you see at BlackHat. Brief introductory issues about the importance of water. This is covered in about 15 pages in my white paper. I wanted to spend most of the talk talking actually about water meters, but without reading everything on the slide, water is a critical infrastructure defined by U.S. law. It's obviously essential for life, for business, for public health, for living. And it basically supports every other critical infrastructure that we have in the country. There's about 17 listed in the federal law. It's a global industry. It's big money. There's a lot of interest internationally by private companies to take over public water companies because there's money in water. If you buy a water company, you're assured of a steady income because people are always going to be buying water. Is usually how it goes. Water has been a source of conflict throughout human history, and no surprise, Al-Qaeda years ago, but repeatedly has threatened to poison the U.S. water supply. Fortunately, they haven't shown the capability to do that, but there have been indications that they've been working on it. And finally, we may not need an Al-Qaeda or anyone to attack our water infrastructure. It's in bad shape. It's got a D- from the American Society of Civil Engineers because it's decaying. There are 100-year-old pipes. There are aged water systems, water treatment plants that are needed repair, and the money just isn't there yet to do the needed maintenance and repair. Water meters are important for that, of course, because that's your cash register. The water bill that everyone gets is based upon the present reading of your water meter and the previous reading, which is usage or consumption. Water utilities in the U.S. collect around $40 billion a year, mostly from the information from water meters, but many of them also will give fixed fees for various things as well, and some don't have water meters. The U.S. is heavily water metered as opposed to Europe and other parts of the world which aren't, and which will charge a fixture fee or a flat rate for the use of water. Having a water meter and charging for consumption is the most effective way to actually charge people and recover the money that it takes to actually produce the water. So the proper operation of the water meter obviously is important to pay for the continued day-to-day operation of the water department, but also to provide hopefully for the need and maintenance and upgrade of the systems that we just heard is behind schedule. But what could go wrong? For example, in Brockton, a town near me, an audit found that most of the meters were 15 years or older. Most of the water bills were not based upon readings, but were based upon estimated readings that turned out to be grossly wrong. So they unwisely decided to give estimated readings going retroactive, which resulted in a lot of people getting very high water bills, such as this poor woman with a $92,000 water bill. And then, as you might imagine, that created quite a ruckus in the community, which called for the audit, which found out that not only were a lot of the meters old, but the billing staff didn't really know how to use them. They weren't reading them properly, they weren't putting the information in properly, etc. So there's a continuing struggle in Brockton to come up with the money to actually get new meters, train people, upgrade the billing system. That's just to give you a picture of what could go wrong outside of any hackers or other parties being involved. A lot of water departments don't manage them properly anyway. Also, as they get old, sediment, which is a polite word for solid matter in the water supply that isn't taken out by the treatment process, which could be anything. Could be sand, could be organic matter, could be pieces of branches, wood, leaves, whatever. No matter how good your treatment process is, you're going to have something left over. And that's going to, over time, build up in the water pipes and clog the water meters. And I'll get into the mechanisms of water meters so you see for most water meters how that can cause a problem. There's also meter tampering for money. Again, mostly in the electric meter area where energy theft is a big business for some people apparently. Electric utilities assume 10% loss every year from tampering with meters. But also for water meters. The Boston Water and Sewer Commission on their webpage says that theft of water by tampering with or bypassing water meters costs them thousands of dollars a year. And this is just with regular good old-fashioned water meters that are mechanical, as far as we know. Water meter. Okay, I'm not going to read everything on this slide, but the three core parts of a water meter, that's your traditional good old-fashioned water meter that's mechanical. And in the U.S., most of them are positive displacement water meters, which and use a nutating disk, which as it moves around, it counts how many times it moves around, and there's and the engineers figured out how much water would be going through the meter for every time it cycles, and that's what turns the dials on the register, which I'll get to in a minute, and counts up the amount of water that's been used. So there's a lot of different types of water meters. Displacement are ones that are the most vulnerable to the sediment buildup that I talked about earlier. Ultrasonic and electronic flow meters are less susceptible because they don't clog. They use electromagnetic forces to detect the flow of water. The diagram on the bottom right is a combined displacement meter, because some types of displacement mechanisms are better in high flows, some are better in low flows, and that basically covers both situations. Now the register, of course, is very important. This is what records the data. So talking in IT terms, the water meter is a data collection device. Now it's data until it's turned into information. So the principal data is on the dial there, the odometer type of thing, is what's gone through the meter. And it's going to be showing everything that's gone through the meter since the meter was installed or until someone had set the odometer to 0. But in most cases, the water department puts the meter in and it runs until it breaks or they upgrade it or something else happens. So the register shows the total volume of water going through since it was installed or zeroed out. And so what you're concerned about is the interval reading between the present reading, whenever that is, which is presumably at the time of the meter reading period, which in most cases is quarterly, in some cases monthly, and so it's the present reading and the previous reading. And again, most water departments do quarterly reads with people walking around. I'll get to that. Some do monthly, and as we'll find out later, when you get to the new technology, you can do it almost anytime you want. But at the moment, you don't get much information from the old-fashioned reads because it's, once a month. So that information is the key information, of course, which is what was the consumption in that month or that quarter. And we'll see what type of information you can get from that and from more frequent readings. Now, the data collection methods, the old-fashioned way with that old-fashioned meter is eyeball, one way of putting it. Someone actually has to walk, a meter reader has to walk into the house usually, and if for a water meter, it's usually in the basement, or it could be in a meter pit outside at the property line, which is usually best practice, but history has been most of them are in the basement where the water enters the house. So someone has to go down, get into the house, your first problem. So someone has to be there to let you in. They have to go down, find the water meter, which if they've done it before, they know where it is. They write it down on a piece of paper, usually. And then they have to go, they go back to the, when they finish their route, they go back to the plant and then write, someone types them in again, or they write them down and someone types them in. So you've got 2 or 3 areas where mistakes can be made in putting the numbers down. Walk by, and we see that in the second photo. So you attach wires to the register that connect it to a device at the outside of the house, so someone doesn't have to enter the house. They just put the gun up against the device, and it's automatically recorded in the computer there. So the advantage is you don't have to enter the house. A human being isn't actually writing something down, and potentially have errors there, and it's more automatic that way. But again, that doesn't really help you increase the frequency of the readings a hell of a lot because you still have to have someone drive and then walk to do it. But it's an improvement. And then there's the drive-by, where there's a transmitter on the meter. It could be on the meter in the basement, or it could be on the outside of the house. And so the meter reader just drives down the street and picks it up on a receiver that's attached to a laptop that has a GPS unit which connects it to the information about the route and the account and so on, and automatically collects that information. That's some of the major increases in up until the point of the talk, which is fixed network. Now, fixed network is really what we're talking about here, where instead of basically it's a step up from drive-by. And a lot of communities will have a drive-by system as they're putting the infrastructure in place for a fixed network. So instead of somebody driving by and picking it up route by route, it's all sent to a central collection facility in a small town, for example. But if you've got a large town with geographical dispersion and you get different elevations, or just a very large community, a big city, you could have collectors at various areas that collect the information and then send it on to the central collection facility, which would be the main treatment facility or administrative headquarters for the water plant. And the advantage, of course, of doing this is that depending upon the technology you have in the water meter, in the transceiver in the water meter, the MXU it's called, you could do readings almost instantaneously anytime you want. There's a wide range of the settings in these automatic water meters in the fixed network. Some could do a reading every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes, daily. It depends whatever you set it for and how much information you want to collect at the central collection facility. This fixed network gets you to two-way communication, which brings up things we'll talk about later. But also it's important to mention that there's more than one way of collecting the information. Radio frequency is the most common in the U.S. for doing this, but it also, like in D.C., in Washington, D.C., they use radio frequency that goes to a collector that then sends a cell phone signal, and it goes over the cell phone to the water plant. So there are various methods of mixing the communication methods for these things. So basic network components are, again, of the entire system, or the wireless transmitter or transceiver on the meter, collector or transceiver, either one central one or a number of aggregators throughout the system that then send it to the central collector itself, and then the billing system. which of course is the objective of the whole exercise, which is to collect people's consumption information to turn it into water bills. So a wireless water meter is, well, it's a number of things. It's an embedded device. It's a node in a wireless sensor network, which we'll get to. It's a data information collection device. Now we have an electronic cash register, as opposed to that old cash register in the earlier photo. Here we have a modern electric device. It's used to regulate the availability of drinking water in the sense that it keeps track for the water department of how much goes into the house or the business. It can be used to conserve water or to keep track of water to better conserve water. I'll get to that. And could it be Big Brother? That's one of the concerns that we'll mention. So types of water meters. There's many different types. There's no standards that are enforced. There's 25 or so manufacturers. Itron's one of the biggest. Neptune, Census, Datamatic, Hexagram, Master Meter, some of the ones there. Those are just the ones that are big enough market share to show on this pie chart. As I mentioned, they use different transmission methods: phone lines, cable, power lines, radio frequency, combination of those. And so the chart on the bottom right gives you an idea of the increase in the number of units that use each of the technologies. Again, radio is by far the most frequent use of this, which is what we'll focus on later. Now, this is a growth area for water systems and potentially for hackers or other third parties. And most of this is, when you research this, you have to look at the advanced metering infrastructure, which is mostly water, electricity. And then you'll find statistics on gas and water. But it's really going up quite a bit. You can see we go from 2.5 billion in 2010 to 5.8 billion in 2015 is an estimate. The world smart water meter market is expected to total 4.2 billion between 2010 and 2016. And the installed base of smart meters is supposed to dramatically increase to worldwide to 31.8 million by 2016. In the U.S., they haven't caught on too much, except in California, where about half of the water meters are AMR. And just a word about that: there's no accepted definition of these terms: automatic meter reader, automatic advanced metering infrastructure, smart grid, smart meter. You could say one and you'd be talking about any of the other ones. Saying AMR, automatic meter reader, could include the walk-by that I talked about, could include the drive-by, could include the fixed network. Advanced metering infrastructure could include that, but usually includes having two-way transceivers so you can communicate back to the meter and do interesting things. And smart meter usually only means transceivers and a fixed network, but it can be a mixture of all of the above. So the terms are sort of slippery in that sense, even for electric smart grid. And when people are talking about the electric smart grid, they've got the same problem in trying to distinguish between the different types. One aside, the ultimate build-out of the electric smart grid would be connecting the smart electric grid to home area networks, or HAN, which would have an IP address or a connection to every electric device in your home, so that when the electric utility is exceeding its supply or seeing that the costs are going up in a peak period, they can automatically shut down devices in your house that are on but not being used, or they can power things down or power things up. Water smart grid isn't quite as useful in that regard, but there are devices that could shut off the water at the home, called Water Cops is one brand. I haven't seen any indication where a home area network would be able to have the same intrusiveness as an electricity, but time will tell. Only about 7% of water utilities in the U.S. have what we call smart water meters, which in my mind would be the full build-out of a fixed network with two-way transceivers and with the capability to perhaps turn the water off at the source as it enters the house. but it's growing, as we were saying. The benefits of AMI, smart water meter to the utility are a number of things. It saves money. You don't have to send people out to go into the house or to the side of the house to read the meter. Better accuracy because it's all automatic. You don't have 2 or 3 people writing and typing the material, which creates human error. Of course, you get into potential computer error, but that's a whole other thing. It allows for more frequent billing. Again, most small water departments use quarterly billing because the cost for sending out the meter readers more than that is just too much. And again, the usual approach is when you get it automatic, either the drive-by or the fixed network, is you go to monthly readings, which is a benefit for the consumer in the sense that it smooths out the costs and they get a better sense of what their costs are each month, and they can better control their water. Instead of finding out at the end of the quarter that we have, hey, did we have a leak? There was a major increase, and trying to figure out where that was. You've got a smaller period of time, smaller interval to check those things out. The other thing is you could set it, and what we did in my community, what we were thinking of doing in my community when we installed a small amount of wireless water meters, is putting them on the big customers or the ones that have problems with potential problems with leaks. Because basically, even if you're not using the information for billing, you could set the information to come in every 5 minutes, every day, every hour, and you get a very fine-tuned look at the water usage in the community. And if there was a leak occurring, you could be the one. You could call the resident and tell them, "Hey, you've got this major water increase. What was going on? Was there any reason for that?" And they say no. Then you could help them by stopping the leak, which would cost the water department lots of money, but also could cost the user for that consumption. It's better. So that's the major driver for water departments is more frequent billing, but also it helps resolve bill disputes because you've got a computer printout, and as most people think, computers don't lie, right? So that's easier for the water department. And again, unaccounted for water is a big bugaboo for water departments. So you get leaks, you get illegal connections, which again are hard to determine in any event, but at least if you had a fine-tuned reading of the water use and you had someone walking around and seeing that there was an irrigation system going, but you didn't see the water use go up when people saw that going, you could probably get a good idea that there was an illegal connection there. Meter errors, again, you could compare the electronic reading to the physical reading, and there's ways to check on that, as long as the physical reading, the actual register isn't malfunctioning itself. That gives you a check against the electronic reading. And as I alluded to, defectivation of water use restrictions. Some of these charts, there's a number of studies looking at how water utilities can use this to regulate the use of water outside of turning it on or off for the house, but also if you do an interval every hour, every day, every 10 days, every 3 hours, pick the interval, which you have the capability to do with an automatic fixed network. It's really limitless in the sense of what information can you get. You're looking for water on, water off. When it's on, how much is being used. So if you, like the bottom graph, you do an hourly interval graph, and at some point, if there's no leak, it's going to get to 0 in most cases. People aren't using water all the time. So if you do an hourly interval graph for a couple days and you see that it never gets to 0, then you probably got a leak. So you look at that for a number of residences or water users in the community, and then you can pin down leaks that are occurring in the home. Or it could be in the collection, it could be in the service line to the house, whatever. Also, if look on the upper graph on the right, so in many parts of the country there are droughts or there's water shortages, and they have an outside water restriction. You cannot water your lawn, you cannot run the automatic sprinklers on odd days or even days, or you can't run them at all. And so the way to detect that now is you drive around and you see, okay, if this side of the street is supposed to be on odd days, this one even days, and you see which ones are violating it. And but this gives you a more definitive read on that, because you can see, okay, up, down, up, up, down. Oh, wait a minute, it's all up now. So I guess they're evading the water restrictions. So again, that's good for water departments, not so good perhaps for the water user who wants to evade the regulations. And then finally, and very importantly, especially in California, which has a state mandate to all the cities and towns and the counties to reduce water consumption, it is a way of keeping track of your water use and the water use in the community, but also to promote conservation, but also to enforce conservation, which is why some people obviously may have a problem with the water department having so much information. But we've got to remember the meter read is not just a meter read. So we've gone beyond where someone comes around once every 3 months or every month and reads the meter and gets one number, and that is used for the water bill. So what is a meter read now with a smart grid? It's part of the billing record, obviously. That's obviously the most important thing. It's leak loss. So it's not only the individual home, but it's also the entire community. You look at, you've got a master meter at the water department plant, that records how much is actually being sent out to distribution. Then you compare that to the total of what's being recorded as consumption in that period of time in the community. And if you find that the numbers are very different, then you've got a leak, or you've got a lot of leaks, or you've got a lot of illegal connections, or all of the above. So this again gives you in the aggregate more control over trying to understand that and answer that question. But also, if you're trying to plan pumping of your water and running your treatment plant, if it doesn't run 24 hours a day, or you have different parts of the city that are different, they're called pressure zones, that because of their elevation, they're separated, and you want to fine-tune your costs and your availability of water. Well, now with this information, you can determine that, hey, this part of town is using 10% more than these other similar sections of the same size, and you can plan accordingly, or when the peak is going to be. So it's a better planning mechanism for the water departments in that way. Obviously, and then also for water conservation, feedback to consumer, so you can tell people. The electric companies have been doing this for a while with just your electric bill, and they'll be able to do more as they get into the smart grid. But water departments can get in that action too, with water conservation being more and more important in most parts of the country. And then this came from a California document where the hammer is really down on the counties and the cities and towns to reduce water use by 20% by 2020, which is really hard. So that's why about half of water utilities in California have some sort of smart meter, and the rest of them are planning to have it in the next few years. But a water automatic meter reader, AMI smart reader, is also a wireless sensor network, which is very interesting. There's a large body of literature on wireless sensor networks that are used for a variety of purposes, but the definition describes wireless water meters: resource-constrained sensor nodes with sensing and processing. The major elements are a sensor node and the base station. So we have sensor nodes, which are all the water meters, and the base station, which is the aggregator, the central aggregator. But then we come into so we compare the inherent vulnerabilities of a wireless sensor network with wireless water meters that we discussed, and it's the same problem. We're talking about the same thing. You've got a wireless medium, which can be intercepted, unintended operation. So even though it's inside someone's house or in a meter pit, no one for the water utility is watching it all the time. And they're not really checking on it that often now because it's automatic. Random topology, you can't really plan now, we want to have it in a grid with a certain topology because it's wherever the houses are or wherever the customers are. And it's hard to protect against insider attacks, which would be someone at the water plant, but also someone who's got one in their house who can maybe use it to get entry to the entire network. They have low power processors. They use low energy. Again, there are batteries that have large capacities, between 5 and 20 years is what I find. And actually they're ones that, why can't you just plug it into the AC? There are some that do that, but you can't always plan on that because of the location of the meter. It doesn't always make that possible. There's actually a new type of meter that comes out now that reduces its electric use to the ultimate minimum and supplements the rest through a connection to AC power. And then small memory. They've got very small EEPROMs in most of these, that I'll get to. So you've got a combination of small resources in this unit that's out there somewhere that you don't have much control over. So what could go wrong, right? So again, looking at the literature on wireless sensor networks that aren't explicitly just wireless water meters. This looks like the taxonomy of every kind of wireless attack or almost any sort of attack in a network is what I see. They just itemize active versus passive attacks. Outsider versus insider. Mote class meaning from one of the nodes versus a laptop class, meaning you're out there with a laptop and you're connecting. Interruption, interception, modification, and replay attacks, which in the electric grid they found there wasn't, I think in Guardians in their Zigbee project found that Zigbee 2.4 gigahertz processors, transceivers that are used for a lot of home area networks and for controlling a lot of physical infrastructure don't protect against replay attacks, or they didn't when Josh did the study a few years ago. And a lot of the wireless sensor networks and wireless water meters are the same. They're susceptible to all these types of attacks. And again, in this body of literature on wireless sensor networks, again, not talking exclusively about wireless water meters, what are the countermeasures? Link layer encryption and authentication, multipath routing, identity. It boils down to security, which a lot of water meters don't have, and a lot of wireless sensor networks don't have. Authentication, encryption, those type of good things that you don't really see in very small units with low memory, low processing power, and low power needs. So looking at those, here's some. The top figure is the top graphic is from a patent for a device, and the block diagram is from Texas Instruments' description of one of their wireless water meter transceivers. And you find, looking at patents of these and descriptions, the brochures from the manufacturers, that they're usually using Texas Instruments, Atmel, Microchips by Microchip, and other well-known companies. But I've started taking apart some wireless water meters, and I'm learning from Travis Goodspeed, of course, and in digging into that. You can't always tell from looking at the chip what it is. You need to dig down and get the part number. But this is a basic idea of you've got the microcontroller, you've got a pulse measuring circuit. Some have direct electronic reading of the water consumption and don't go through the mechanical functions that I mentioned earlier. Then you get the EEPROM, and you get an LCD display, so you can see, you can actually, even with the automatic ones, there's a procedure, of course, to actually physically read it. And then, of course, there's the transceiver. So I went through some patents, and I won't read all this, but so I started taking apart the Census MXU Model 550. Didn't get very far, I'm afraid to say, but I started taking it apart, so I figured, hey, where can I get some information about this? And they're very nice to print the patent number right on the casing. So I look up the case, so I read the patent, and it says they use an Intel 8051 family integrated circuit microcontroller. They have 1 kilobit of non-volatile storage in the EEPROM, which may be a Thomson 993C46 or equivalent. Then they give the process for interrogating the MXU and getting the information, pseudorandom code, and I wouldn't be surprised if this was given in the clear. That's what a lot of folks in the electric smart grid found, that a lot of the keys would be in the clear. Or Rob Havalt, when he looked at frequency hopping spectrum a couple of years ago here, found that the spread spectrum pattern was also in the clear if you could find a way to read it. So I'm going through a lot of patent descriptions to get ideas of what's in these things and descriptions. And you find a lot of off-the-shelf things that if you dig further, you can get the information on how they work and what the firmware might be. Now, radio frequencies, this is why it's harder to sniff or dissect wireless water meters in the U.S. than it does for the electric meters or the Zigbee, is that almost all of them are 902 to 928 megahertz. And most of the work going on in the hacker community and security community looking at smart grid is in 2.4 gigahertz. So part of my challenge in trying to figure out how to sniff these is building something and finding what's already been built for 900 megahertz, and I'll get to that. So 900 megahertz, my water meter in my basement is a Neptune meter. It transmits every 14 seconds. Doesn't mean you have to receive every 14 seconds, but it means it's sending something out. It might just be a keep alive, but it's sending something out. I'm still digging to get the frame information and what's in there. It has 50 transmitter channels. There's no encryption, and in the description it says that their security method is frequency hopping sped spectrum, which is described. It's a layer 1 method of transmission where there's a set pattern, and there's a number, I think it's 70 standard patterns that can be used for breaking the signal up and sending it in different parts of the frequency range. And again, this first was developed during World War II as a security method, and as we're increasingly find out, it's not a good security method. Although it does, the advantage is that you can reduce problems from overlapping with, say, cell phones or microwaves or other, technologies that are used at the same frequency, and it allows it to be more effective that way. So getting to why would someone, not us of course, but why would anybody hack into water meters? So obviously if you've got a water meter and you can figure this out, you could reduce your water bill. Or you could be evil and increase someone else's water bill. You could steal water. Again, if you could evade that detection I showed earlier for someone evading the water restrictions, then you could get away with watering your lawn even though you weren't allowed to. Or you could just reduce your water bill maybe in amount, percentage that wasn't going to be detected easily. And if enough people did that, then the water department would have a problem. But a lot of people could save money. So you're stealing water and, of course, stealing money. Evading water restrictions. I think that's going to be very popularly used for this if people build a device to do this. Surveillance of human activity in the home. I was surprised to learn there's a great deal of activity out there for surveillance. I forget the exact term. So it's remote sensing of human activity or something like that. And I'll be getting to that earlier, a little later for water use. But there are researchers across the country looking at it for water use, gas use, electric use. They're fascinated, and these aren't NSA or CIA funded as far as I can tell, but there are researchers out there trying to find out, how can I find out what you're doing in your home without actually going into it? And then my big question is, could the wireless water meter network be used to introduce malware into the, well, it's not always SCADA, but the control system at the water plant? And of course, they would never connect the business system to the control system, right? Well, about 55% of water systems do in a recent survey. And that was a small number of sources, so it could be as high as 75% or more. So it's a question, and I won't be able to find out till I can do a pen test, and I don't do much pen testing, but because I can't just go out there and try it. Might be fun. But also, could it also be useful to getting into the other smart grids? Because again, the ultimate build-out of smart grid technology is to have a comprehensive system that has electricity, water, gas, whatever else you're using in your house. And then have it in a home area network where everything is monitored and controlled by the utility. And so while honestly water isn't as interesting to most people as electricity is, it's interesting enough to me and hopefully to everyone in the room where you can do things, but you might get more bang for the buck if you can use it as an entry into the other systems. But again, I haven't got very clear to answering those last two questions. So the evil consumer, could the evil consumer hack into the wireless water meter and steal, water and money? For example, cable descramblers. As we're all probably aware, there was some hackers or crackers very busy a number of years ago, and some have got arrested for building these descrambling units to get cable TV for free. And I found out through research that in China anyway, there were people being arrested for building similar devices to steal electricity through their smart grid, or wireless electric meters. there's an old established technology for you can if you know what you're doing and you don't want to and you don't enough not to get killed with electricity, where you can do it. You can hardwire the electric meter in a certain way to bypass it. But it's probably more efficient if you get the frequencies down and you can do a man-in-the-middle attack to do everything I was talking about earlier. Reduce your electric use. Could you do that for water? Well, again, it's only a matter of getting the right frequency and getting around the frequency hopping spectrum. Other ones use DSS, and some use encryption. So that's a possibility. I haven't heard of anybody doing that yet. There's some hurdles still have to be overcome for be able to at least sniff it, let alone do the man-in-the-middle attack. But that's a possibility out there. The evil insider. Now, insider threats to critical infrastructure is being highlighted recently by Department of Homeland Security as being a serious threat. This is a report, the insider threat to critical infrastructure, that came out in 2008. This has been some more recent stuff that's come out on the news and some advisories from DHS. And it's a realistic concern for the water department as a whole, the electric utility as a whole, the sewage facility as a whole. So it's a there have been indications that Al-Qaeda or other terrorists have tried to recruit people that work at water plants or sewage plants or electric facilities. And the one example in the wastewater industry is in 2000, a disgruntled former consultant at the Marucci, Australia sewage treatment facility got on his laptop, told the wireless network that the laptop was a node in the network, and told all the pumping stations to turn on, and he dumped 800,000 liters of sewage into waterways. That's as close as I can get for an example of an evil insider in a wireless water network. I can't really think of an opportunity for a insider, someone working at the water plant, to use the wireless water meter network. It's more efficient for them just to do something at the plant. But however, if you're trying to actually get into, I suppose, the wireless water network, you do the mode attack that we talked about earlier, and being a node on the network, you could then try some of those attacks on the entire network, perhaps. But I don't know how useful that is. It's probably more useful to get your laptop and get a man-in-the-middle device and then try something else. Terrorist is something that is the other potential threat. So what could a terrorist do? If they're trying to attack, shut down, or poison a water supply, they could perhaps use it to get their own database of the water usage and build a hydraulic map of the system, maybe. More likely is in areas where there's a water cop attached at all of the houses or water connections, so they could go around and turn all the water off and then upgrade the firmware so you couldn't turn it on. That would be bad. But that, of course, conflicts with the terrorist objective that some of them say they have to poison the water. But again, it might be useful for them as part of an overall attack. So these are reasons for water utilities to secure these systems more than they might otherwise consider. And the smart grid is very wormable. I don't know if that's a word. But Thanasis Giannetsos, I don't know if I pronounced that right. He's giving a talk a couple sessions later in another track on similar issues, actually, on wireless sensor networks. But at BlackHat Spain 2010, he demonstrated the Census attack tool, which, as far as I can tell, was 2.4 gigahertz. He's got his own hardware and software that he wrote up, where he was able to demonstrate a worm attack and sort of basically demonstrate a lot of those attacks that I mentioned earlier on a wireless sensor network. So part of my future plans is to get that software and see if I can adapt it to 900 megahertz. And then IOActive, Mike Davis gave a talk here in 2009 about a worm attack on an electric grid. And of course, he didn't use a real electric grid. They set up a simulation. And the picture on the bottom is sort of halfway through the simulation. It's on YouTube, where you can see it from all green, You know, they're all owned by the electric system at that point, and then the red increasingly creeps up and takes over, you know, all the nodes. And that's because for the electric grid anyway, there doesn't appear to be any authentication to prevent firmware updates from someone who's not supposed to do it. So in a mesh system especially, you send out a worm to upgrade the firmware, upgrade quote unquote, and then part of that is to, you know, keep going and upgrade the next one, and of course tell it not to allow anyone to then you put the authentication in for yourself as the hacker, as the attacker, and tell it not to let anyone else upgrade it. So that'd be a very serious disruption, obviously, for a city or anywhere if you could send a worm out and shut down all the electricity. In my talk last year at DEFCON on the security threats to the national drinking water infrastructure, an important issue is interdependencies. And I don't know, I ran a water department in New England which had an emergency generator. And if you're in New England, you've got an emergency generator for anything that needs to run all the time. But I find in many parts of the country, water departments don't necessarily have emergency generators, which is very strange to me. And since 9/11, there's been and it's in my white paper, there's been a more attention, hopefully, to security for water systems. And so there's an interagency task force, something or other, that's been looking at this nationally, working with the water industry and the different associations that represent water departments. And part of the report that came out end of last year was that you know, maybe a significant portion of them, maybe 75, 80% of them now have emergency generators. And I just have to shake my head saying, my God, you know, it's a water plant. So obviously, if you shut off the electricity, in most areas, many areas of the country, you're shutting off the water, you're shutting off the sewer, you're shutting off emergency services. You know, so that's really, if you're an attacker, that's where the biggest bang for the buck is. But of course, if you could also send a worm to the water system and shut off all the water, that would create even more disruption and create a problem for public health. And of course, everyone's running around with their head cut off trying to figure out what's going on. Why is the electricity off? Why is the water off? So I say it could be just as vulnerable only because no one's tested the same type of thing for the types of meters used in wireless water meter grids. But again, that'll be my presentation next year, I hope. But perhaps the biggest concern is Big Brother. And I guess I shouldn't use the question mark. So this quote here is from a newspaper in Cary, North Carolina called The Watchman. And it might be a right-wing conservative newspaper, but that's beside the point. There are people here, and this is their bold print. Cary citizens have a right to be concerned about the information of our private lives that our town staff will be able to collect if the Aquastar AMI water meter system is implemented as planned. So I meant to raise, you know, Big Brother as a potential issue, and I really wasn't sure until I found this, that there are people actually up in arms that someone's going to know what their water use is, as if they don't already know. But the thing is, with the AMI system, with potentially continual readings, as this Daniel Burris points out, you could find out a lot more about people. And when you take a shower, when you water the plants or wash the dishes, how much water and electricity for the similar system you could use at any point in time, using what you're using it for. So that's a general privacy argument, which is very valid, something we deal with and EFF has been working on. So I found a couple other, do an internet search, and you'll find a number of other communities up in arms that, my God, someone's going to find out what I'm doing in my home. And that's a realistic concern. It's even more, but are we being paranoid? Well, this is adapted from a chart looking at electric grid privacy issues. So again, hacker mentality. We know what the water meter is supposed to be used for, but what else could it be used for? So you get the utilities. Okay, that's obvious. Monitor usage and load, determine bills, helps plan the load, helps find unaccounted for water, all the things we talked about earlier. That's all legitimate, I suppose. Water conservation advisory companies, well, that was electricity. So what if a company that's in the market to help sell devices to conserve water? So they get the information from the water department, you know, who sells it, you know, or it's stolen and it's out there, and they find out that this part of the community is overusing water and doesn't seem to be able to figure out how to conserve water, and so they use it as a marketing campaign. This is just somebody thinking outside the box on electric grid, and I'm translating it for water. Insurance companies, marketers, law enforcers. I tried to find a couple examples of, let's say, illegal drug use, and someone at the VIP party last night suggested, or drug production, that meth plants, if you're making meth, crystal meth, I can't pronounce it, you need water and electricity. So perhaps, the cops or the DEA could be looking at your water use, and with these additional tools, they could really fine-tune what your water use is and see, when lights are on or they're not on and the water use is up, and use that as a search warrant to get in and bust you for producing meth. Civil litigators, landlords, I don't know. Some of this gets speculative, but right now only 7% of the U.S. water utilities have smart meters, so it's not really that big maybe as a concern. But 10 years from now, when almost everyone has them, we could all be seeing these type of concerns come up. Private investigators, the press. Again, electricity is probably more interesting, but add that to water and you can get more information about the human activity in the home and perhaps, get somewhere with it. But there's more. I mentioned earlier there's a whole research industry looking at remote sensing of human activity in the home. And so some researchers at the University of Washington, out near Seattle, I think, came up with HydroSense through a federal grant. I don't think it was from the CIA, but probably was from the EPA. It's a simple thing. You just attach to any water pipe in the house, and then you have a wireless signal go out from it so you can get the data, and it could be backhauled perhaps on the wireless water meter. The original concept isn't related to the water meter, but obviously it's another source of information about exactly what you turn on and off in your house, and how long you turn it on or off in determining the flow. And it's fascinating. So anyone can attach it, whether you as the homeowner know it's being attached or not. It's very easy to do. Don't need a plumber. Don't need a degree in plumbing. But it's a very simple concept that I described there. So the water in your house is a closed system, and it's basically a vessel. It's a weird shape because it's all these pipes and valves and so on, but it's really a closed vessel. So you turn a faucet on or off, turn the toilet on or off, flush the toilet, and it creates what's called a water hammer, which then it's detected anywhere else in the system, and doing some calculations that can determine where exactly the water hammer was created, and then get the flow and get the information on what exactly, what device was used and how much was used. So this is a way to gather more information remotely, basically, of human activity in the home. There's a couple other variations of this. One is actually uses the water meter and just attaches a separate vibration sensor on the water pipes, and is actually part of the water meter. So it's not inconceivable, especially in these places like California they're trying to make serious efforts to conserve water, that these could be attached, maybe required to be attached to homes. And then you're really talking about privacy concerns. You get much better information to conserve water and to find violators of water regulations, but you've got more information out there. So that's more of an motivation for the man-in-the-middle devices, so you could filter, perhaps, what the utility is getting, information on what you're doing. Looking at water meters in general, there's other vulnerabilities. If you do research, again, I'm still doing research. There's so many different types of water meters, designs. So you look on the web, you find all this information, rich information on the web. One vendor tells us what frequency they transmit on and tell us that there's no encryption or frequency hopping spectrum. So that's good to know. Badger gives out its default network username, password, and wireless key. So, I should try to sniff that first if I can get a 900 megahertz system working. Transceivers can be purchased on eBay. I've got a couple that I'm taking apart. Most of them don't have any encryption or any sort of security device at all, although that's more manufacturers are coming out with ones that would actually meet some of our standards for security. For example, one manufacturer calls third-generation electronic water meters, and here's a description. Here's a graphic that don't need batteries. That was the one I talked about that reduces the electric use to a minimum, and then takes the rest off AC. So that actually reduces one of the potential attacks, which is resource exhaustion. So one way you could wipe out the water meters in a system. This is in the general literature on wireless sensor networks, is you just keep sending hello signals or ACKs or something to just use up its battery. So this is a way of not having that vulnerability because it uses the least amount of electricity necessary to actually read, to get the reading, and then it takes that from AC power. But again, there aren't many of these out here. And it comes all built in with the electronic reading of the water use and the transceiver. So there's less add-on, which you get in the early generations of water meters. And there are ones coming out now with AES 128 or 256-bit encryption. Interesting to find out, whether they transmit the key in the clear and how that works. So there's more ways to go on that for me. But there are ways to sniff frequency hopping sped spectrum transceivers, again, that I looked at. It's Shmoocon 2011. Atlas Cutaway and Q from InGuardians had a presentation where they actually were able to sniff 900 megahertz using FHSS, using the CC1111 EMK, which they say is probably the most frequent one used in electric meters. So I've got that hardware, and I'm trying to replicate their design. They've got code on their website, and it's the link for that, the URL for that is in my paper. Rob Havalt, who I corresponded with, used the USRP, the Universal Software Radio Peripheral, and the GNU Radio. To what he did is he told me is he listened on all frequencies at the same time, listened for the management frame that gave him the sequence for the frequency hopping, and then with some software he wrote, he fed that back in and was able to read the whole signal. So I haven't sprung for a $1,500 USRP2 yet, which is how he did it. And that may not be the easiest way for a cracker or an evil third party to get into this thing, but it's a way to start figuring it out. Okay, and I was hoping to talk about how I actually sniffed a water meter, and I haven't been able to do that. I ran out of time. It's harder than I thought it was going to be. Surprise. I tried the Atmel, there you go, the Atmel RZ600 because it was advertised as being able to have a sniffer, and there was software. There wasn't. And as it turns out, the firmware might not be able to even support this. Then I got the FunCube software radio peripheral, which I think that's, we'll talk about this next slide. So the Atmel, so here's where my continuing work, because it is possible, I'm pretty sure, to sniff the 900 megahertz radio signal from US wireless water meters. The Atmel RZ600 development kit does listen in 900 megahertz range. It didn't work right out of the box. I had to email their help desk a few times to actually get the firmware so I could run it on my XP machine. Someone else wrote a bridge program, they said, so you could use it with Wireshark. I haven't got that working yet either. And then I corresponded with some researchers at Ryan Spears at Dartmouth, who said he was talking to Travis Goodspeed about maybe upgrading the firmware was needed on the RZ600 to be able to use it for sniffing. So there's more work going on there. The objective here is something that's less costly than perhaps stringing for a $1,500 USRP2. Then there's the Texas Instruments CC1111 868 to 915 megahertz evaluation module kit, which Atlas Cutaway and Q used. That's only like $50. And they gave a demonstration at Shmoocon where they were able to use that to break the frequency hopping sped spectrum. But they admitted that it was a little buggy and they were still working on it. But you can get their code free off their Google code page. and I'm going to be trying that out. Something that looked very promising that I could barely get out of the box was the RFM DNT 900DK, which is, again, an entire evaluation kit to listen in 900 megahertz. The FunCube Dongle Pro, got a fun name. I just got this a week ago, so I haven't had time to figure it out yet, but it's a software-defined radio in a 64 to 1700 megahertz range, so it's right in the range that I need. It costs about $186, including shipping from England. So it's a question of configuring the software, the GNU radio, to read the signals and then find an application, maybe like Rob Haval did, to find the spread spectrum sequence, and then have it listen in the specified frequency hopping range. And the IME, there's a great talk, Real Men Carry Pink Pages by Travis Goodspeed and Michael Osman, gave a TourCon 2010, where they reveal that the IME, which is a $35, $50 pager used by teenage girls, and it's got a USB dongle for the laptop or the computer, and then it's a pager, but it's used for instant messaging. And they said it was just very easy to hack, and they showed how they cut it open and used the GoodFet to get into the firmware and use it to. It's got all sorts of uses. They turn it into a spectrum analyzer, and other uses as well. So I think I try to bite off more than I could chew with all this technology, because I was hoping to say, here's how you could sniff it. So these man-in-the-middle attacks are really possible. So I guess I apologize for not being able to do that, but that was sort of an extra from my talk, which was intended as an overview of the issues and the concerns over wireless water meters. So wrapping up, zombies ahead. I think we've all seen those signs that hackers or others have hacked, and there's lots of them. First it was Australia, then it was in South Carolina, and now they're everywhere. And that's an example of hacking a SCADA system, a type of control system. Sort of easier than your usual water system, I suppose, but it's an example. So to sum up, water meters are an integral component of the national drinking water infrastructure. I picked them to look at as something that was easily investigatable, as opposed to trying to get into the control systems at a plant, where I would need a pen test arrangement or whatever to get into. But also they're available. You can buy them on eBay. There's information that's accessible that I've gotten some of to investigate them. You can actually get the hardware, either it's discarded or buy it on eBay. So there's lots of opportunities there for looking into this technology. I think of all the possible issues that I looked at, the highest profile concern for all of us and people going forward, especially as more of these are built out throughout the U.S., is privacy and surveillance. Not only from the water department finding out what you're doing, whether or not they use HydroSense, but also if it's intercepted or the information is sold or stolen, what could other parties do with the information? And the next critical issue is potential theft of water. If someone builds a man-in-the-middle device, which could be very lucrative, especially say a big company or an area that has high water use, it's an application that may be coming, like the descramblers for cable, or the devices that steal electricity I mentioned in China. I mean, there's already tampering with water meters going on now. This just creates another avenue for doing that. So the objective of this talk was to look at the potential vulnerabilities and to hopefully come up with suggestions and recommendations for making them better secured. And as we've seen, they need security, they need encryption, they need authentication built in. And the trouble is with the infrastructure being built sort of organically from a lot of different manufacturers who don't have the same standards, And a lot of times they're adding on to a non-wireless water meter. They're doing an add-on to a device that sits on top of it that connects with wires. That there isn't an opportunity for a lot, for a lot of them to be secured now. It's hard to add security on later, and the best thing would be perhaps for national standards to be developed to require security at the outset, so it could be built into the production costs for these units instead of having an additional cost in all the water departments when and if such requirements are made. And I know from my experience running a water department, when we looked at getting wireless water meters, it's cost. Okay, we save money by not sending water readers out, but what's the cost for building the fixed network? And so if you increase the cost by saying, okay, you've already built out this wireless water meter network, you need to replace them all, it ain't going to happen, especially since water departments are short of money and they're already behind in doing their required maintenance and upgrade that was pointed out by the American Society of Civil Engineers. So it's an area that also that not many people are looking at. I've attended some sessions of the National Institute for Standards and been on the Smart Grid blog and looked at a lot of the issues dealing with the smart grid, which is electricity. And the real thing is no one's really looking at water. Probably because it is, honestly, it's less interesting than electricity. But on the other hand, I look at it because it's very important. And as I said earlier, I'm taking this from a water-centric view, coming first as a former water commissioner, that more attention needs to be paid to this issue, and something needs to be done at the national level, I think, to deal with these issues. And finally, this is a growth industry, not only for the water meter manufacturers and a growing cost issue and upgrade issue for the water utilities, but also for hackers, especially in California where 50% of the water utilities have these type of things, but also the rest of the country as they come up. We'll be running into more of these things. And it's important that, that we develop the capability to find out the vulnerabilities and then hopefully come up with the ways to deal with them. I want to thank Mark Mafreet, Rob Haval, Travis Goodspeed. They all sent me information and helped me get through parts of my research. Most of what they told me is in the white paper, which is in your CD. I want to thank Atlas Cutaway and Q for their presentation on Shmoocon that I'm hoping to work on and develop some more. And Bob Johnson, again, this is in my white paper, not in the talk, but he is he's keeping an archive of the National Department of Homeland Security daily infrastructure update reports, which is very useful for me in trying to get an idea of how insecure is the national water industry, the national water infrastructure. The short story is that it's insecure. On the other hand, it's hard to attack, as you'll see if you look at the white paper, because the water infrastructure is fragmented. The electric infrastructure is very integrated. There are 3 grids, east, west, Texas, and as a Chinese researcher reported last year, it's relatively easy to knock out an entire grid with attack on 2 or more nodes. You can't do the same thing with the electric, as in the electric grid with the water grid, because they're all separate. But again, an area of entry that wasn't there before now is the wireless water meters. Again. Finally, the reason for this talk was to point out some of the vulnerabilities and to urge more to be done to make them more secure. Thank you.